The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of Ravencrest Palace when the first black banner appeared. Sarah Mitchell, a young journalist from the London Herald, noticed it fluttering from the highest tower as her taxi approached the grand gates. She had come to cover what was supposed to be a routine royal engagement, but something felt different in the air. The palace guards wore solemn expressions, their usual ceremonial smiles replaced by tight-lipped silence. As Sarah stepped out of her taxi, she could hear the distant toll of bells echoing across the palace grounds. The sound sent chills down her spine. "Excuse me," she called to a guard stationed near the main entrance. "What's happening here today?" The guard looked at her with tired eyes. "The palace has declared a period of mourning, miss. All scheduled events have been canceled." Sarah felt her journalist instincts kick in. A story was brewing, and she could sense it was bigger than anyone realized. She pulled out her press credentials and approached the media liaison office, a small building tucked away near the palace's east wing. Inside, chaos reigned. Phone lines rang constantly, and several palace staff members huddled in urgent conversation. Margaret Thornfield, the chief press officer, looked up from a stack of papers with visible stress etched across her face. "Ms. Mitchell, isn't it?" Margaret said, recognizing Sarah from previous events. "I'm afraid today's interview with the Duke has been postponed indefinitely." "I can see that," Sarah replied, pulling out her notebook. "Can you tell me who has passed away?" "The public deserves to know." Margaret's face went pale. She glanced around nervously before leaning closer to Sarah. "That's just it," she whispered. "We don't know." Sarah's pen stopped moving across the page. "What do you mean you don't know?" "The order came directly from the Queen's private secretary this morning. All flags to half-mast, all engagements canceled, full mourning protocols to be observed immediately. But no one has told us who died." This was unprecedented. Sarah had covered royal news for 5 years, and she had never heard of such a situation. Royal deaths were always announced with great ceremony and detailed statements. The protocol was clear and well established. "Has anyone tried to ask?" Sarah pressed. Margaret shook her head. "Sir Edmund Blackthorne, the Queen's private secretary, isn't taking any questions. He simply issued the directive and disappeared back into the private quarters. Even the household staff are confused." Sarah thanked Margaret and stepped back outside. The palace grounds were eerily quiet, with only the sound of footsteps on gravel and the occasional murmur of confused visitors being turned away. She decided to walk the perimeter of the palace, hoping to gather more information. Near the servants' entrance, she spotted a group of kitchen staff taking their break. They were speaking in hushed tones, their faces filled with worry. Sarah approached them carefully. "Good morning," she said with a friendly smile. "I'm Sarah Mitchell from the London Herald. I wonder if you could help me understand what's happening today." An elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, who had worked in the palace kitchens for over 30 years, looked up from her teacup. "It's the strangest thing, dear. We were preparing for the usual Tuesday luncheon when suddenly Mr. Blackthorne appeared and told us to stop everything. Said the palace was in mourning." "Did he say who had died?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "That's what's got us all worried. In all my years here, I've never seen anything like it. Usually when there's a death in the royal family, we're told immediately so we can prepare the proper arrangements. But this time, nothing." A younger kitchen assistant, James, chimed in. "I heard some of the footmen talking. They said the Queen herself looked confused when she was told about the mourning period, like she didn't know who it was for either." This revelation sent Sarah's mind racing. If even the Queen didn't know who had died, then who had issued the mourning order? And why was Sir Edmund Blackthorne being so secretive? Sarah spent the next few hours talking to various palace workers, guards, and officials. The story that emerged was consistent, but baffling. Around 6 in the morning, Sir Edmund Blackthorne had begun issuing orders for full mourning protocols. Black banners were raised, bells were set to toll every hour, and all public engagements were cancelled. But he refused to explain why. Dr. William Ashford, the palace physician, was particularly troubled by the situation. Sarah caught up with him as he was leaving his office in the palace's medical wing. "Dr. Ashford," she called out. "Sarah Mitchell, London Herald. Can you shed any light on what's happening today?" The elderly physician stopped and adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been the royal family's doctor for 15 years. In that time, I've been present for every significant health issue, every birth, and every death. Today, I was told the palace was in mourning, but I haven't been called to examine anyone. No one has died on my watch. Are you saying no one in the royal family has passed away?" "I'm saying I haven't been informed of any deaths, which would be highly unusual. The royal physician is always the first to know about such matters." Sarah felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form. She decided to try a different approach and headed to the palace archives where historical records were kept. If this was some kind of traditional mourning period she wasn't familiar with, perhaps the archives would hold clues. The archive building was smaller than the main palace, built of the same gray stone but with a more modest design. Inside, Sarah found Professor Eleanor Cromwell, the palace historian, surrounded by ancient books and documents. "Professor Cromwell," Sarah said, introducing herself, "I'm trying to understand the mourning protocols currently in effect. Is there any historical precedent for a mourning period without announcing who has died?" Professor Cromwell looked up from a leather-bound volume, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "That's a fascinating question, Ms. Mitchell. I've been researching the same thing since I heard about today's events. In all my studies of royal protocol spanning over 4 centuries, I've never encountered such a situation." She gestured to the books spread across her desk. "Royal mourning has always been accompanied by official announcements, usually within hours of the death. The public has a right to know who they're mourning, and there are specific protocols for different types of royal deaths. So this is completely unprecedented? As far as I can determine, yes. There are records of delayed announcements, usually when royalty died abroad or under unusual circumstances, but never a mourning period with no announcement at all." Sarah thanked the professor and continued her investigation. As the day wore on, more details emerged from her various sources. The Queen had indeed seemed surprised by the mourning declaration. Prince Charles had been seen arguing with Sir Edmund Blackthorne in a palace corridor. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury had called, confused about whether funeral preparations were needed. The mystery deepened when Sarah discovered that Sir Edmund Blackthorne had been acting strange for several days prior. Palace staff reported that he had been working late nights, meeting with unknown visitors, and seemed increasingly agitated. As evening approached, Sarah sat in a coffee shop near the palace, reviewing her notes. She had spoken to dozens of people, from high-ranking officials to kitchen staff, and the picture was clear. No one knew who had died, or if anyone had died at all. The mourning order seemed to have come from Sir Edmund alone, and he wasn't talking. Her editor, Robert Hayes, called just as she was organizing her thoughts. "Sarah, what's the story? The whole country is talking about the palace mourning, but no one knows what's happening." "Robert, this is bigger than anyone realizes. I don't think anyone has actually died. I think Sir Edmund Blackthorne has declared mourning for reasons known only to him." "That's impossible. He can't just declare royal mourning on his own authority." "That's exactly what I thought, but I've checked with constitutional experts. The Queen's private secretary does have significant autonomy in palace operations, especially in emergency situations. If he believed there was a death that needed to be kept secret temporarily, he could theoretically implement mourning protocols." "But why would he do that?" Sarah stared at the palace in the distance, its flag still flying at half-mast. That's what I intend to find out. As night fell over London, the palace remained shrouded in mystery. The black banners continued to flutter in the evening breeze, and the bells continued their hourly toll. But somewhere in those ancient corridors, Sarah knew, lay the answer to a puzzle that was growing more complex by the hour. She had interviews scheduled with several more palace insiders for the following day, including a former lady-in-waiting who had promised to share what she knew about Sir Edmund's recent behavior. There were also rumors of a secret meeting that had taken place in the palace library 3 nights ago, attended by Sir Edmund and several unidentified visitors. Whatever was happening at Ravencrest Palace, Sarah was determined to uncover the truth. The mysterious mourning period was just the beginning of what promised to be the story of her career. As she walked back to her hotel, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of a scandal that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. The palace kept its secrets well, but Sarah Mitchell had made a career of uncovering the truth. Tomorrow, she would dig deeper into the mystery of the mourning that seemed to be for no one at all. The next morning brought no relief from the mysterious atmosphere surrounding Ravencrest Palace. If anything, the situation had become more complicated overnight. Sarah Mitchell arrived early, armed with fresh questions and a list of contacts who had agreed to speak with her. Her first appointment was with Lady Catherine Westbrook, a former lady-in-waiting, who had served the royal family for 12 years before retiring the previous month. They met at a small tea room several blocks from the palace, away from prying eyes and listening ears. Lady Catherine was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She stirred her tea thoughtfully before speaking. "Ms. Mitchell, what I'm about to tell you must be handled with extreme care. The reputation of the monarchy depends on discretion." Sarah assured her that she would be responsible with any information shared. "Sir Edmund Blackthorne has not been himself lately," Lady Catherine began. "About 3 weeks ago, he received a visitor, a man I had never seen before, well-dressed but with a foreign accent. They met in the library for over 2 hours. Did you overhear any of their conversation?" Lady Catherine shook her head. "The library doors were closed, but I could sense tension. When the meeting ended, Sir Edmund looked pale, almost frightened. He canceled his appointments for the rest of that day and locked himself in his office." "What happened after that?" "Strange things. Sir Edmund began asking odd questions about historical records, particularly about secret royal deaths and cover-ups from centuries past. He also requested files about something called Protocol 7, which I had never heard of in all my years of service." Sarah made careful notes. Protocol 7 was a new piece of the puzzle. "Do you have any idea what Protocol 7 might be?" "None whatsoever. But I do know that Sir Edmund met with the same mysterious visitor 2 more times over the past 3 weeks. The last meeting was 3 days ago, the night before the mourning was declared." After thanking Lady Catherine, Sarah headed to the National Archives, hoping to find information about Protocol 7. The archives were housed in a modern building across London, far removed from the ancient walls of the palace. Dr. Marcus Reed, the chief archivist, was a thin man with thick glasses and an encyclopedic knowledge of government documents. When Sarah mentioned Protocol 7, his expression became guarded. "That's a rather obscure reference, Ms. Mitchell. May I ask why you're interested in it?" Sarah explained her investigation into the palace mourning situation, carefully omitting specific details about her sources. Dr. Reed listened intently, occasionally nodding. "Protocol 7, he said finally, refers to a classified procedure established during World War II. It was designed to handle situations where the death of a royal family member needed to be kept secret temporarily for national security reasons." National security? How would a royal death affect national security? During wartime, the death of a monarch or heir could have devastating effects on public morale. Protocol 7 allowed for the postponement of death announcements until a more suitable time. However, it was only used once in 1943, when the king's brother died in a bombing raid. His death wasn't announced until after D-Day. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Is Protocol 7 still active? Dr. Reed adjusted his glasses nervously. Technically, yes. It was never officially repealed, though it hasn't been invoked since the war. But Ms. Mitchell, implementing Protocol 7 would require authorization from the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, even MI5 would need to be involved. This information sent Sarah in a new direction. If Protocol 7 was indeed being invoked, it meant the government was involved in whatever was happening at the palace. She decided to contact her sources in Whitehall. Jonathan Pierce, a civil servant in the cabinet office whom Sarah had cultivated as a source over the years, agreed to meet her for lunch at a pub near Westminster. Jonathan was a nervous man in his 40s, always looking over his shoulder, but he had reliable information about government operations. "Sarah, I have to be careful what I say," Jonathan began, glancing around the crowded pub. "But yes, there have been some unusual communications between the palace and various government departments over the past few days." "What kind of communications?" "Requests for information about emergency protocols, constitutional procedures for handling crises, that sort of thing. The Cabinet Secretary has been in several closed-door meetings with the Prime Minister. There's definitely something brewing, but nobody's talking about what it is." "Have you heard anything about Protocol 7? Jonathan's face went white. "Where did you hear about that? Is it being implemented?" "I can't confirm or deny anything about Protocol 7, Sarah. That's classified material. But I will say this, if such a protocol were being invoked, it would mean we're dealing with something far more serious than a simple royal death." After lunch, Sarah returned to the palace area, more determined than ever to uncover the truth. She had arranged to meet with Thomas Hartwell, a retired palace security chief who had maintained contacts within the current security apparatus. Thomas was a large man with graying hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades protecting important people. They met in his car in a parking garage several blocks from the palace. "The security situation at the palace has been elevated since yesterday morning," Thomas told her without preamble. "Extra guards have been brought in from other royal residences, and there's been increased surveillance of the palace perimeter." "Surveillance? Are they expecting trouble?" "It's hard to say, but I spoke with my replacement, Chief Inspector Morrison, this morning. He's been ordered to implement what they call Condition Red security measures. That's usually reserved for serious threats to the royal family." Sarah frowned. "But if someone had died, wouldn't security be decreased, not increased?" "Exactly. That's what has everyone confused. You implement Condition Red when you're protecting someone, not mourning them." Thomas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's something else. 3 nights ago, around midnight, several vehicles arrived at the palace through the private entrance. Black sedans with government plates. They stayed for about 2 hours, then left the same way they came." "Did you recognize any of the passengers?" "I wasn't there personally, but my contacts described men in dark suits who looked like intelligence operatives, MI5, possibly MI6. They went straight to Sir Edmund's office and had a meeting that lasted until nearly 2 a.m. The pieces were starting to form a clearer picture, but it was more complex than Sarah had initially imagined. This wasn't simply about a death being covered up. It seemed to involve national security agencies and classified protocols. Her next stop was to visit Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, a constitutional expert at Oxford University who had written extensively about royal protocol. Dr. Hartman agreed to meet Sarah at her office, a cluttered room filled with legal texts and historical documents. "Ms. Mitchell, what you're describing is unprecedented in modern times," Dr. Hartman said after hearing Sarah's findings. "The invocation of wartime emergency protocols during peacetime would require extraordinary circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" threats to national security, potential international incidents, or situations where the normal functioning of government could be compromised. If Protocol 7 is indeed being used, it suggests that whatever has happened involves more than just the royal family. Dr. Hartman pulled out a thick manual of constitutional procedures. There's another possibility you might not have considered. What if no one has died but someone has disappeared? Sarah looked up from her notes. Disappeared? If a member of the royal family went missing under suspicious circumstances, kidnapping, defection, or worse, it might trigger the same security responses you're seeing. The Mourning could be a cover story while intelligence agencies work to locate the missing person. This theory opened up entirely new possibilities. Sarah thanked Dr. Hartman and headed back toward the palace, her mind racing with new questions. As evening approached, Sarah positioned herself at a cafe with a clear view of the palace's main entrance. She had learned that patience was often rewarded in investigative journalism, and she hoped to observe some of the mysterious activity that others had described. Her patience paid off around 7 o'clock, when 3 black sedans pulled up to the palace gates. The vehicles were immediately waved through without the usual security checks, suggesting their occupants were expected and important. Sarah managed to photograph the license plates before the cars disappeared into the palace grounds. A quick call to a contact at the DVLA confirmed her suspicions. The vehicles were registered to government agencies, specifically MI5. As she waited to see if the vehicles would emerge, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or face consequences. This is your only warning." The message sent a chill down her spine. Someone was clearly monitoring her investigation, and they weren't happy about her progress. But rather than deterring her, the warning convinced her that she was on the right track. 20 minutes later, the black sedans emerged from the palace grounds. This time, Sarah was ready. She managed to get clear photographs of one of the passengers, a man in his 50s with distinctive silver hair and a stern expression. Back at her hotel, Sarah uploaded the photos to her laptop and began cross-referencing them with publicly available images of government officials. It took an hour, but she finally found a match. The man in the photograph was Sir David Chambers, the Director General of MI5. The involvement of the head of MI5 confirmed that this situation was far beyond a simple royal death or disappearance. MI5 dealt with threats to national security, espionage, and terrorism. Their presence suggested that whatever had triggered the mysterious mourning involved serious security implications for the entire country. Sarah spent the rest of the evening trying to piece together the timeline of events. 3 weeks ago, Sir Edmund received mysterious visitors. Over the following weeks, he researched historical protocols and held secret meetings. 3 days ago, intelligence officials visited the palace. Yesterday morning, the mourning was declared. But one crucial piece was still missing. What had actually happened to trigger this chain of events? Tomorrow, she would need to dig deeper into Sir Edmund Blackthorne's background and recent activities. She also planned to investigate whether any members of the royal family had been seen publicly in recent days. As she prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting close to something much bigger than a simple palace mystery. The involvement of MI5, the invocation of wartime protocols, and the threatening message all pointed to a story that could shake the foundations of the British government. Whatever secret the palace was hiding, it was important enough to mobilize the country's top intelligence agencies. And Sarah Mitchell was determined to uncover the truth, regardless of the risks. The third day of the mysterious mourning period began with an unexpected development that would change everything Sarah Mitchell thought she knew about the case. At 6 in the morning, her hotel phone rang with a call that made her blood run cold. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Chief Inspector Morrison from Palace Security. Sir Edmund Blackthorne would like to meet with you immediately. A car is waiting outside your hotel." Sarah's mind raced. After receiving the threatening text message the night before, She hadn't expected direct contact from the palace, but this could be the breakthrough she needed to uncover the truth. The black sedan that waited outside was different from the government vehicles she had seen. This one bore royal insignia, and the driver wore the formal uniform of a palace chauffeur. During the silent ride to the palace, Sarah tried to prepare herself for whatever revelation awaited her. Instead of entering through the main gates, the car took her to a private entrance she had never seen before. Sir Edmund Blackthorne himself was waiting in a small reception room, looking haggard and years older than when she had last seen him at a public event 6 months ago. "Ms. Mitchell, please sit down," Sir Edmund said, his voice strained. "I understand you've been investigating the Mourning declaration. What I'm about to tell you will explain everything, but I need your word that you'll handle this information responsibly." Sarah agreed, though she kept her recorder running discreetly. Sir Edmund took a deep breath before beginning. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that Prince Alexander had been compromised by foreign intelligence agents. Not the Prince Alexander you know from public appearances. He's been missing for 2 months. Sarah's pen froze over her notepad. Prince Alexander was the Queen's youngest son, known for his charitable work and relatively private lifestyle. Missing? But he appeared at the hospital opening just last week. "That wasn't Prince Alexander," Sir Edmund said quietly. "That was his double, a man named David Cromwell, who has been standing in for the prince at public events for the past 8 weeks. We've used body doubles before for security reasons, but never for this long or under these circumstances." The revelation hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. "Where is the real Prince Alexander?" Sir Edmund stood and walked to the window, staring out at the palace gardens. "That's what we've been trying to determine. 2 months ago, Prince Alexander was supposed to return from a private holiday in Scotland. He never arrived. His security detail found his car abandoned near the border, but there was no sign of struggle, no ransom demands, nothing. Why wasn't this reported to the police? Why wasn't there a public search? Because 3 days after he disappeared, we received a video. Prince Alexander appeared to be unharmed, but he was clearly being held against his will. The kidnappers made it clear that any public disclosure of his disappearance would result in his death." Sarah scribbled notes furiously. "So you used a body double to maintain the illusion that he was still free?" "Exactly. David Cromwell is a former actor who had already been working part-time as Prince Alexander's stand-in for security purposes. He knows the prince's mannerisms, his speech patterns, even his personal quirks. For public appearances, he was perfect. But something changed 3 weeks ago." Sir Edmund nodded grimly. "We received intelligence that suggested Prince Alexander's kidnappers were connected to a foreign government operation. That's when MI5 became involved, and that's when everything became more complicated." "What kind of foreign operation?" "The kind that could destabilize the monarchy and compromise national security. The kidnappers weren't interested in money. They wanted information about classified government communications that passed through the palace. Prince Alexander had access to certain security briefings that made him valuable to foreign intelligence services." Sarah began to understand the scope of the situation. "So the mourning period was implemented to buy us time. We discovered that the kidnappers had become suspicious about the body double. They were planning to expose the deception, which would have created a public relations disaster and potentially put Prince Alexander in greater danger. Protocol 7 allowed us to suspend all public appearances while we worked to resolve the situation." "Have you found him?" Sir Edmund's expression darkened. "Yesterday morning we received another video. Prince Alexander appears to be alive and unharmed, but the demands have escalated. The kidnappers now want us to publicly announce his death and hold a state funeral. In return, they claim they'll release him secretly." "That's impossible. You can't fake a royal death and funeral." "That's exactly what I told them. But they've made it clear that if we don't comply, They'll release evidence that Prince Alexander has been missing for months, along with details about government security protocols they've extracted from him. Sarah felt the full weight of the conspiracy settling over her. So the mourning isn't for someone who has died. It's preparation for someone who might have to be declared dead. The mourning was also a signal to the kidnappers that we were willing to negotiate, but we've reached an impasse. We can't fake his death, but we can't afford to have our security procedures exposed to foreign agents. Sir Edmund returned to his chair, looking exhausted. Ms. Mitchell, I'm telling you this because we need the press to understand what's at stake. If this story breaks prematurely, it could cost Prince Alexander his life and compromise national security for years to come. But Sarah had more questions. Who are these foreign agents? What country are they working for? We believe they're associated with a rogue intelligence operation, possibly Russian or Chinese, though we can't be certain. They've been remarkably sophisticated in covering their tracks. What about David Cromwell, the body double? Does he know about this? He knows Prince Alexander is missing, but he doesn't know the full extent of the situation. He's been told it's a temporary security measure. The strain of maintaining the deception is taking its toll on him as well. Sir Edmund pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. There's something else you should know. We believe the kidnappers have someone inside the palace feeding them information. That's how they knew about the body double arrangement and how they've stayed ahead of our rescue attempts. Someone inside the palace is working with the kidnappers? We've narrowed it down to a small group of people with access to sensitive information, but we haven't identified the traitor yet. That's another reason for the increased security you've observed. Sarah's mind was spinning with the implications. What happens now? You can't maintain this charade indefinitely. We have a plan, but it's risky. Tonight, we're going to stage a rescue operation based on intelligence we've gathered about Prince Alexander's location. If it succeeds, we can end the mourning period and explain it as a false alarm, perhaps a confusion about a distant relative's death. And if it fails? Sir Edmund's expression was grim. Then we may have no choice but to comply with the kidnappers' demands, at least partially. We might have to announce that Prince Alexander has died in an accident while declaring that his funeral will be private due to family wishes. It would buy us time to continue searching for him. As Sir Edmund finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. Chief Inspector Morrison entered with an urgent expression. Sir, we've had a development. The surveillance team reports unusual activity at the suspected safehouse location. Sir Edmund stood immediately. What kind of activity? Multiple vehicles arriving throughout the morning. It looks like they might be preparing to move the prince to a new location. Sarah realized she was witnessing the planning of a real-time rescue operation. Inspector Morrison, do you mind if I ask, is this connected to the increased security measures around the palace? Morrison looked to Sir Edmund, who nodded permission to answer. Partly, yes. We've also had intelligence suggesting that the kidnappers might attempt to infiltrate the palace to gather more information or even target other family members. Other family members are at risk? It's a possibility we can't ignore, Sir Edmund replied. That's why the Queen and other senior royals have been kept in secure locations within the palace complex. You may have noticed that none of them have made public appearances in the past few days. Everything was beginning to make sense to Sarah. The mysterious mourning, the involvement of MI5, the increased security, it was all part of an elaborate operation to protect the royal family while attempting to rescue Prince Alexander. Sir Edmund, there's something I need to tell you, Sarah said. Last night I received a threatening text message warning me to stop my investigation. I think the kidnappers know I'm looking into this. Sir Edmund and Inspector Morrison exchanged worried glances. That confirms our suspicions about inside information being leaked, Morrison said. Ms. Mitchell, your safety could be at risk. Which is why I'm going to ask you to remain here at the palace for the next 24 hours, Sir Edmund added. both for your protection and to ensure that sensitive details about tonight's operation don't leak out before we can act. Sarah agreed, realizing that she had stumbled into a story far more dangerous and complex than she had imagined. A member of the royal family had been kidnapped by foreign agents. The palace had been using a body double to maintain the deception, and now a rescue operation was being planned that could determine the fate of the monarchy itself. As the day progressed, Sarah was given a guest room in the palace where she could observe the preparations for the rescue mission. She watched as specialized teams arrived. Equipment was moved into position, and communications were established with various government agencies. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had started investigating a mysterious mourning period, only to discover that it might become real if the rescue operation failed. At 8 o'clock that evening, Sir Edmund briefed her on the final plan. Based on intelligence gathered over the past weeks, they had located Prince Alexander at an abandoned warehouse complex outside London. The rescue would be conducted by a joint team of SAS operatives and MI5 agents with full government authorization. "If this works," Sir Edmund told her, "the mourning will be lifted tomorrow morning, and we'll announce that it was declared in error due to false information about a distant relative's death. The public will never know how close we came to losing a member of the royal family. And if it doesn't work, then you'll have the story of the century, and the monarchy will face its greatest crisis in modern times." As Sarah waited through the long night, she reflected on the incredible sequence of events that had brought her to this point. What had started as routine royal coverage had revealed a conspiracy involving kidnapping, international espionage, and the use of classified wartime protocols. At 3 in the morning, Sir Edmund returned to her room with a smile on his face, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in days. "It's over," he said simply. "Prince Alexander is safe. The kidnappers have been arrested, and we've recovered evidence of their intelligence operation. The inside source was identified and taken into custody as well." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Who was the inside source? A junior clerk in the communications office who had gambling debts. The kidnappers had been blackmailing him for information about palace security procedures. The next morning, the black banners were quietly removed from the palace flagpoles, and normal operations resumed. The official announcement stated that the mourning period had been declared in error following miscommunication about the death of a distant relative. Prince Alexander made a brief public appearance that afternoon, looking healthy but tired. David Cromwell, the body double who had played such a crucial role in maintaining the deception, was quietly reassigned to other duties with a substantial bonus for his service to the crown. Sarah Mitchell had her story, though she would never be able to publish the full truth. Instead, she wrote about the confusion surrounding the mysterious mourning period and the palace's explanation of administrative error. But she knew she had witnessed something unprecedented in the history of the British monarchy. A crisis that had threatened to expose the royal family's vulnerabilities while demonstrating their resilience in the face of modern security threats. The palace declares mourning mystery had been solved, revealing that sometimes the identity of the deceased remains unknown because there was no deceased at all, only a carefully orchestrated deception designed to protect those who were very much alive.